I've got the Bell film on my mind, so I'm going to point out things that I think should be noticed in the Bell film. And the first thing we'll notice here, as they're coming around the corner, Jackie already has her hand on her hat. There's a story going around, coming from James Alkins and also from Mrs. Reed or Ride, who supposedly saw Jackie put her hand up on her hat from her fourth floor window, or was it her second floor window, I think it was. No, she wasn't in the building at the time. Never mind, let me not talk about Mrs. Ride. She's not doing it in response to the wind coming down Houston Street. She had her hand on her hat before the car made the turn, and she has it there because she is giving a signal. It's the go signal. She is ready to do her part in the operation that's around the corner. And then we got this guy here standing on the corner. He already has his hand on his hat too. And as the car comes around the corner here in slow motion, we can see him putting his hand down. But Jackie still has her hand up on her hat. And I say this fella on the corner is Rip Robertson of the CIA. And I say standing next to him is Ted Shackley of the CIA. And I say this is a CIA operation. And the CIA has contacts in every agency, so it's not just CIA personnel involved. And I think that Rip Robertson is relaying the signal. He's seen Jackie is ready to go, and he's telling the Secret Service agents in the front of the car that they should be ready to go. And John Connolly is also involved in this operation, but he's looking to the other side of the street, so he can't see Rip Robertson giving the signal. Instead, he sees this police officer on the other side of the street who already also has his hand up on his hat. And I think this is R.C. Nelson. I think he was planted in Dealey Plaza to give the signal and also to take over J.D. Tippett's car after J.D. Tippett had been shot in Dealey Plaza. And next along Houston Street are Barbara and Arnold Roland. Arnold Roland was a controlled witness being handled by Forrest Sorrells, and we won't get into the details here. And next is this spot where sometimes I think there's a motorcycle there, sometimes I'm not sure. You cannot see it in the Bell film if it is there, and I'm not going to spend any more time on it in this video. And this here is a spot where there appears to be no police officer. You can't see one there in the Bell film. You can't see one there in the Alkins 5 photo. But you can see one there in the Zapruder film. And you can see one there in the Towner film. This all has something to do with Edgar Leon Smith, wherever he was standing. I think he said he was standing on the east side of Houston Street. I think he was on the west side of Houston Street, but I'm not going to try to get into the details of that here. And moving along, this is the throwing man. He's a black man in a white suit. I think he's the Murchison chauffeur, and he's throwing something you can see in slow motion if you pay close attention. And I think the reason he's throwing something here is because George Bush, right there, is standing there with a camera, and he wants to get a photograph of the president when he's turning to look at something being thrown at him. And you can see Bush puts a camera up in front of his face here. And that's my opinion, of course. This is not the official story. But I think that's Bush, and that he had the chauffeur throw something so he could get a nice picture of JFK just before he was murdered. And also to note in this scene is the people on the two pedestals here. On the right-hand side, there is an official story that that's Tony Glover and her mother. I think that's bullshit. I think that that's a paste-in, and that it was pasted in to cover the fact that somebody else was standing on there. And I think the 15-year-old black boy, who came to be called Amos Ewens, was standing on that pedestal. And on the other side, I think, is the brother, the second black boy, the 11-year-old that Forrest Sorrells acknowledged that there were two of them and that one ran off, he said, and that he never made any effort to talk to the other one, he said. And I think that's the one on the left. That's the 11-year-old black boy. And I think the Forrest Sorrells, who was handling the cover-up, part of it anyway, wanted there to be one black boy. And so he disappeared the other one from the evidence, and therefore it had to be disappeared photographically. And so we have the Glovers pasted in there to cover one of them, and the story is that the Amos Ewens was not on the pedestal. He was by the pedestal on near the street. And as I said, I think these two black boys were brothers. I think there was an 11-year-old, his name was Ernest L. Ewens, and there was a 15-year-old who was Leonard E. Ewens, and the name was changed to protect the cover-up. And I think the Bell film was altered to alter the appearance of the 11-year-old boy and make him look like a fat, older person. And here, the same person appears in the Bell film, and I think if you show them side by side, you can see that the guy in the Martin film, and the one in the Martin film looks a lot thinner and more animated. And I think, it's easier if you're going to fake a person in a video, in a film, to not have them be so animated. So I think the Bell film was altered to make this look like a fat, unanimated person. But if you compare to the Bell film, you can see that something's amiss. I mean, they got to be the same person, but they don't look the same. And then I want to note this area directly in front of the building. There's nobody up against the building. The people are all standing out on the edge of the street. There's nobody next to the building. But fake-ass witness James Worrell said he was right there up against the building. He marked a Warren Commission exhibit to show where he was. And what we have to notice in the Bell film is that there's nobody there. James Worrell was not where he said he was. And another thing to notice is Danny Arche. That's where he was standing. That's him right behind Cowboy Man, I call him, guy dressed in white. And you can see him in the Alkin 6 photo. You can see his face there. And in one of the, I don't know if it's the Darnell film or the Weigman, one of those other films, you can see he's there too. But that's Danny Arche. And the next thing I'll stop on is Charles Brem, visible in one frame in the Bell film. I've covered this recently, so I'm not going to get into it more here. And then we have motorcycle officer James Chaney, visible, barely visible, under the underpass. This was covered up in the evidence that he passed the presidential limousine and went ahead to Chief Curry's car before the limousine had got to the overpass. And the reason it was covered up is because he sat under the bridge and he waited for William Greer's gun to be handed to him. That's why he's under the bridge. And then we have this guy here running away from the overpass with something in his hands. I've made a video about this. I think he might be one of the three tramps, and I think he might be a guy by the name of Malcolm Jerry Hoy. And I think these two people running towards him might be involved with him, but I really don't know. And the next thing to notice here is Zapruder, apparently walking away from the pedestal at this point. But very shortly he turns around and walks back towards the pergola shelter. And I'll note here that according to me, of course, this is Alan Tippett, the son of J.D. Tippett, and he was involved in the assassination plot, and here he is carrying away Mrs. Chisholm's short handbag, which it was his job to dispose of. And as I have noted elsewhere, Mrs. Chisholm started the day with a short handbag, or normal-sized handbag, and ended up with this large handbag. And that's handbag, the large handbag holds the gun that was used behind the picket fence. And getting back to Zapruder, we can see that he actually walks into the pergola shelter where other people are and other people will go to, and he will talk with them. And I view this as significant because he didn't mention this in his Warren Commission testimony. In his testimony, he went right back to the office, but here he's talking to a lot of people about something. And next here we have two motorcycle officers. The one on the left is J.W. Williams. The official story says it's H.B. McLean, but I say it's Williams because that's who Marion Baker said it was, and he was riding next to him in the motorcade. And the one on the right is Bobby Hargis coming back to his motorcycle. He had gone to some wall and stood upon it so he could get a good look at things. We don't get to see exactly where he went. But later on, he said that he actually saw Roscoe White, presumably on the other side of the picket fence. I don't know if that's true or not, but it's worth noting. And next, we can see the Chisholms. Where are they? There they are, running away with the murder weapon. And Clyde Haygood has just steadied his motorcycle and is starting his run up to the overpass, where he will encounter the railroad detective with the rifle, who will never be identified or even noticed by any of the investigators. Also, I should note that Haygood is standing on an invisible steam pipe, but that's another story in another video. And moving along again, the next stop is back with James Chaney under the overpass. And here we have another man in the scene, and he runs slowly over to Chaney, where Chaney has William Greer's gun. And I'm going to run this part in slow motion. Bell is panning away from the scene, but you can see that man is running directly towards where James Chaney is parked with the gun. And I think this person is probably Officer L.L. Hill, because he later said on the radio, in case anybody cares or it still matters, regarding Officer Tippett's pistol, I gave it to Sergeant Owens. So this is why I think that the gun that Greer was using was actually J.D. Tippett's gun, and it was returned to Tippett. This is why Calloway took the gun away from the scene on 10th Street, because that wasn't J.D. Tippett's gun. Greer was using Tippett's gun, and Hill takes that gun from Chaney and gives it to Sergeant Owens in Oak Cliff. And so when it's all said and done, if they need to blame anybody for using a pistol in Dealey Plaza, they're going to blame J.D. Tippett. And he's dead, so what can he say about it? And then we get the scenes of these peoples running around, and I'm not sure I can discern anything of significance there. The next thing I notice is this police officer walking away from the scene when all other cops are going to the scene. And I think he might have something to do with the shooting of Tippett. Tippett was shot in Dealey Plaza, by the way, but we'll not explain that here. But this guy, when he sees the camera, he puts his hand up to his face like he's trying to hide his face. But then he walks right in front of the camera. I think it's the same guy, though he doesn't walk high enough that you can see his face. You can just see his eyes. I can't identify him. He has an atypical hat, though. I have a video about this. It's a hat you would see usually on a more senior sort of officer, a higher level officer, but it doesn't have a band across the front like every other officer has. So I think this guy is involved. I think he was involved in the shooting of Tippett in Dealey Plaza, but I don't know who he is, and I don't think I ever will. And that's about all I can see of significance. I think the rest of the film here is also from the day of the assassination, so some of these scenes from above might be interesting, but I haven't been able to find anything that I regard as significant. So that ends it. The things you should notice in the Bell film.